Shelby Parker didn't even glance closely at the boarding pass. She snatched the slip of paper from the hands of the sharply dressed black man in the gray suit. "You must be in the wrong lounge," she said, her voice carrying just enough for everyone in the VIP lounge to turn their heads. And then, without warning, she slapped him, a sharp, dry smack that left a deadly silence hanging in the luxurious room. Darnell Hayes remained motionless, offering no resistance. His eyes followed the boarding pass as it fluttered to the red carpet, as if that thin slip of paper had been humiliated along with him. The VIP space, usually serene, had been shaken. A few patrons muttered under their breath. Some pulled out their phones, but Shelby stood tall, lips curved as if she had just done the right thing, protecting the class of this space. No one asked who Darnell really was. No one considered the possibility that they had just witnessed a grave mistake. He remained quiet, not yelling, not shoving back. His calmness made the moment feel stranger still. Everyone sensed something deeply wrong, though they couldn't yet name it. That moment marked the first crack in a brewing storm, and while Shelby believed her temporary authority had just been reinforced, in truth, she had sown the seed of a tragedy, one that would soon erupt before everyone's eyes. Minutes later, Shelby's favoritism became even more evident. A couple dressed in designer walked in. Instantly, her tone shifted, a sweet smile blooming, a slight bow of the head, chairs pulled out as if they were royalty. The clink of glassware on the table added to the air of luxury. But when she turned back to Darnell, her face hardened immediately, cold, distant. She held the boarding pass delicately between two fingers, flicking it lightly as if it were worthless junk. "You should wait outside," she said, her contempt unmasked. Darnell remained composed. He straightened his suit, sat upright, eyes fixed on the large window overlooking the endless runway. Not a single word of protest, not a hint of hostility. His restraint only made the onlookers more uneasy. In a distant corner, Ethan Cole, the lounge manager, glanced at the scene but didn't intervene. He knew Shelby sometimes went too far, but he tacitly approved. After all, he wanted to preserve the luxury image of the VIP lounge. The stark contrast between the two greetings, radiant smiles for the well-dressed couple, coldness for a seemingly ordinary man, planted a clear sense of injustice in the witnesses' minds. That injustice was now the fuse, ready to lead the audience deeper into an irreversible conflict. Shelby raised the boarding pass again, eyes scanning it before frowning. "This seat class doesn't match. I have no idea how you got this, but this isn't a place for you." Her tone was icy, sharp as a knife. Each word landed, eliciting a few stifled chuckles nearby. Darnell's expression didn't change. He looked at the ticket in Shelby's hand, eyes deep and serene. He didn't reach for it hastily. He simply nodded slowly, as if her accusations couldn't touch him. Yet his silence made the atmosphere even heavier. Shelby flipped the ticket between her fingers as if inspecting a counterfeit item. This small gesture was like a second slap, unseen, but far more painful. Some patrons began shifting uncomfortably. One muttered, "This is awful," but didn't dare speak louder. Ethan Cole, standing nearby, merely observed. He sensed something was off but allowed Shelby full control, as if avoiding involvement. At that moment, the injustice was no longer abstract. It had become public action. Darnell was questioned, scrutinized, as if he had intruded into a space he had no right to. And with her piercing gaze and condescending words, Shelby had pushed the situation one step closer to the edge of irreversibility. The tension hung thick, almost tangible. Shelby tilted her chin toward Darnell, then to Ethan. "I think he's taking a spot meant for real guests. We can't let this affect the lounge's image." Ethan frowned, stepping closer. "May I see a photo ID, sir?" His tone remained polite, but carried an undercurrent of suspicion. Darnell smiled faintly, eyes steady. "I believe the boarding pass is sufficient," he replied, extending his hand, waiting for Shelby to return the ticket. She shook her head, voice sharp. "No, I need to be sure. People like you usually try to slip into places you don't belong." Her words made a few nearby patrons hold their breath, and Riley Adams, a young traveler in the corner, quietly raised his phone, recording. A fleeting wave of tension swept through the lounge. Darnell remained seated, hands clasped, back straight, eyes calm yet resolute. His composure was not weakness. It was a silent declaration. He knew he had every right to be there. Meanwhile, Shelby's tone hardened, as if one more push would grant her total control. No one in the lounge suspected that this very moment laid the groundwork for a public showdown no one could avoid. Shelby crossed her arms, eyes fixed as if holding absolute authority. "Listen carefully. If you don't leave this lounge immediately, I will call security." Her voice carried enough for all to hear. No subtlety remained. The conflict was fully exposed. Ethan Cole nodded subtly, tacitly supporting Shelby, as if ejecting a guest were routine to maintain the brand image. But faced with this imposition, Darnell did not stand. He sat, hands resting on his knees, eyes calm, yet unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere. This is where I belong." Silence stretched, heavy as a hanging gavel. Some patrons nodded in agreement with Shelby, others bristled at the disrespect, but all understood this was the boundary. Either Darnell would bow, or a conflict would erupt. Shelby sneered, pulling a small walkie-talkie from her belt. "Then you've chosen the harder path," she said, pressing the button. The static signal of security echoed, signaling that the tension was about to escalate. At that moment, the audience in the lounge realized they were no longer bystanders. They were witnesses to a confrontation entering its most dangerous phase. The threat shifted the atmosphere. Whispers rippled among patrons, faint murmurs like stray electricity across the room. Riley Adams, the young man in the corner, raised his phone higher. The screen lit up, capturing every detail. Darnell Hayes remained seated, eyes toward the glass, yet everyone could see he was trapped in a social trial. Shelby lifted her chin, savoring the silent approval of like-minded observers. A nearby guest muttered, "Of course, anyone dressed like that clearly doesn't belong here." Quiet laughter added to the cruelty of the scene. Riley recorded everything, lips pressed tight, realizing the video could become crucial evidence. Others hesitated, half wanting to intervene, half fearing trouble. They chose silence, letting the raw humiliation play out before them. Ethan Cole stood between the two, but instead of extinguishing the fire, he merely shook his head, signaling Shelby to continue. The illusion of authority now had an ally, weighing heavily on the seated man. The crowd's pressure targeted not only Darnell, but also put the onlookers in a moral bind. Would they silently condone the injustice or recognize that they had just witnessed blatant humiliation? Not long after, Darnell looked toward the service counter. He signaled for a glass of water. Voice low but polite. "A glass of water, please." Just as the young attendant approached, Shelby intervened. "No, don't bring him anything." Her tone was absolute, like a command. The attendant froze, glancing at Ethan Cole. The lounge manager, instead of intervening, merely nodded slightly, as if this denial were perfectly reasonable. The young server stepped back, leaving Darnell seated, dozens of eyes on him. The lounge fell silent, but the quiet carried immense weight. A nearby guest shook their head, whispering, "They're denying him a glass of water?" Shelby caught it, and the whisper ceased immediately. Darnell remained unruffled, adjusting his cuff, eyes dark, yet calm. His poise made the situation even more bitterly ironic. A man deprived of the smallest comfort in the midst of what was supposed to be the pinnacle of luxury. The empty chair beside him was like an exclamation point, emphasizing isolation and humiliation. Shelby turned her back, lips curled in a smug half-smile, convinced she had just asserted the class of the lounge. But the other guests began to feel a chill. A refused glass of water was no longer a trivial matter. It was a sign that the humiliation was escalating beyond control. Shelby wasn't done. As she walked past, she deliberately jostled her shoulder, sending a few drops of coffee from her cup spilling dangerously close to Darnell. "Oh, sorry," she said, the smirk betraying her intent. A few mocking chuckles echoed from a corner, seemingly fueling her act of humiliation. Darnell looked down, slowly grabbing a napkin to wipe the floor, not a word of complaint. His calmness was a mirror, reflecting the ruthless rudeness that had overtaken the room. An elderly woman nearby shook her head softly, but remained silent. Riley Adams did not. He tilted his phone, capturing every accidental detail on camera. Through the lens, everything was clear. Deliberate intent, contemptuous glances, and the still composure of the man being humiliated. Shelby continued her taunting. "Maybe you should get used to this. Here, we serve real guests." Her voice stretched intentionally, making sure the entire room could hear. The air grew heavier, as if the luxurious lounge had transformed into a stage for a cruel farce. Darnell didn't respond. He lifted his head slightly, eyes sweeping over the onlookers. A glint flashed, not anger, but a weighty patience. The audience in the room felt suffocated. Injustice had crossed a line, and they could sense something was about to explode at any moment. Shelby's heels clicked sharply against the floor, a drumbeat of urgency. She raised her walkie-talkie, voice icy. Security. Immediately to the VIP lounge. Intruder needs to be removed. Each word struck like a nail, exposing the ferocity of the faux authority she wielded. Ethan Cole, standing nearby, frowned but did not intervene. He adjusted his tie, as if sidestepping responsibility. Some guests held their breath. Others smirked, anticipating that the upcoming confrontation would finally deal with the person who doesn't belong here. A security officer appeared at the door, walking slowly, hesitant. His gaze shifted between Shelby and Darnell. Mr. Hayes remained seated, hands resting neatly on his lap, eyes calmly fixed on the newcomer. The stillness, oddly enough, made the officer hesitate. Shelby's eyes narrowed. "There! Get him out!" But Darnell's silence wasn't fear. It was an invisible force pressing back against the pressure. The room seemed to shudder. They felt something approaching the limit. The atmosphere sank, heavy as a storm about to break. Everyone understood. One wrong move, and the situation would erupt in ways no one could predict. Then, the unthinkable happened. Shelby lost her restraint. In a heated moment, she stepped directly in front of Darnell, hand swinging through the air, and landed a sharp, clean slap across his cheek. The sound ripped through the room, echoing like a whip cracking in a silent cathedral. The boarding pass in her hand flew, spinning through the air before landing on the red carpet. Everyone froze. A few seconds of absolute silence passed, as if the lounge itself had stopped breathing. Darnell did not resist. He tilted his head slightly, picked up the fallen ticket with slow, deliberate precision. His eyes met dozens of onlookers' gazes, and in that silence lay a weight far heavier than any slap. A guest whispered, "Oh my God." Riley Adams gripped his phone, heart pounding, knowing he had captured a moment that would shock many. The security officer remained frozen, unwilling to step forward. Shelby panted, seemingly realizing she had crossed a line, but it was too late. The luxury lounge was no longer a resting place. It had become the scene of public aggression. Everyone understood. From this point, there was no turning back. After the slap, the room fell into total silence. Shelby stood, chest heaving, as if she had claimed the ultimate victory. But Darnell Hayes simply turned his face toward the light, hands slowly reaching down to retrieve the boarding pass. The motion was unhurried, mesmerizing everyone with each movement. He smoothed the ticket and lifted his head. His eyes met the lens of Riley Adams's phone held high. That look carried no anger, only a silent command. "Keep recording." Riley shivered but kept his grip firm as if receiving an unspoken order. Darnell pulled a phone from his jacket pocket. One smooth motion, he opened the screen and pressed a single button. The display lit up, reflecting a mysterious glow in his eyes, as if he had activated some hidden source of power. Shelby froze, unsure of what the small gesture meant. While the room still reeled from shock, Darnell said nothing more. Silence became his weapon, turning him from the victim into the center of attention. A quiet authority had emerged, yet no one could name it. The lounge hung taut like a drawn bowstring, waiting for what would unfold from that extraordinary calm. The door opened, snapping everyone from their stupor. A woman in a black suit strode in, purposeful and commanding. Zoe Martinez, a senior representative of the Airline, carried a tablet glowing with an internal alert. "Everyone stop all actions immediately." Zoe's voice rang clear, shaking the room. Shelby recoiled, face pale, while Ethan Cole straightened, suddenly unsettled. Zoe moved to the center, scanning the room before locking eyes on Darnell. "Passenger Darnell Hayes is under direct protection from executive leadership. Any interference with him is strictly prohibited." The room erupted again. Whispered questions trembled through the air. Direct protection from leadership? What does that mean? Riley quickly angled his camera, capturing every word. Shelby tried to respond, voice wavering. But I was just following procedure." Zoe cut her off. Procedure does not include violence or humiliation of guests, especially not with this individual. A wave of silence swept over the lounge. Everyone realized Zoe's presence wasn't merely administrative. It signaled a major secret about to be revealed. Zoe Martinez took a deep breath, tilting her tablet toward the crowd. On the screen appeared large letters. Darnell Hayes, major shareholder, chairman of the board. The room staggered. Murmurs rose like crashing waves. Shelby stood frozen, face ashen. The walkie-talkie fell from her hand with a clatter. Ethan Cole stepped back, eyes wide in disbelief. Guests who had laughed before were suddenly silent, shifting from contempt to respect. Darnell rose slowly, deliberately. He didn't need words. He lifted the boarding pass one final time, smoothed it out, and placed it neatly on the table. The small gesture became a declaration. The ticket Shelby had dismissed was proof of real authority. Zoe's voice was firm. All actions that humiliated Mr. Hayes will be reported directly to the executive board. No exceptions. Her words struck like a hammer of justice, sealing the undeniable truth. Guests exchanged glances. The man who had been humiliated now appeared as a monument of power. From shame to respect, it happened in mere moments. Shelby, once brimming with arrogance, now faced only the judgmental eyes of those who had once cheered her on. The air thickened with tension. Zoe signaled security forward. "Escort this employee out," she commanded coldly, leaving no room for negotiation. Shelby struggled. "Wait, I didn't know who he was. I was just doing my job." Darnell lifted his head, calm yet commanding. "You don't need to know who I am to treat me with basic respect," he said evenly, his voice echoing through the room. It sent a shiver through everyone, not just Shelby, but all who had chosen silence before. Ethan Cole tried to step forward, stammering, "Mr. Hayes, I apologize for this unintended situation." His words were feeble. Zoe jotted notes on her tablet, creating evidence for disciplinary action. Shelby was escorted out, her uniform, a former symbol of faux power, now a burden. Some guests bowed their heads, ashamed for having once endorsed her behavior. Riley Adams still held his phone tightly, knowing he had captured a rare moment of justice. Judgment had been delivered, public, uncompromising. From that moment, Shelby was no longer in control. She was a living example of the consequences of arrogance and injustice. She vanished from the lounge, leaving a heavy silence behind. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to regain professionalism, voice trembling. "Mr. Hayes, on behalf of the entire lounge, I apologize." The apology sounded belated, insufficient to erase the stain witnessed by all. Darnell did not respond immediately. He sat back in his chair, adjusted his jacket, and calmly placed the boarding pass on the table. Guests who had avoided his gaze now approached, some nodding respectfully, some whispering apologies. No words were needed. The change in attitude spoke for itself. In a corner, Riley Adams kept filming, now focusing on Darnell's serene face. That video, once shared, would tell the entire story, from public humiliation to the moment justice turned the tide. Ethan addressed the room. "From today, we will review all VIP lounge protocols. No one will be treated disrespectfully based on appearance again." His words echoed, an attempt to atone for a system that had failed. No one in the room could forget the contrast, from initial contempt to absolute respect. Darnell did not need to shout. His composure alone commanded deference. The wide glass doors let in runway light. Darnell stood, boarding pass in hand, walking between rows of now reverent eyes. He proceeded toward the boarding gate, confident yet humble. Before passing through security, he paused, glancing back at those remaining. Voice warm and clear. "Respect is not a privilege. It is the minimum everyone deserves." Short words, but they etched themselves into every mind present. Riley lowered his phone, heart still racing. He knew he had witnessed a moment destined to circulate widely, a lesson for anyone who ever confuses appearance with true worth. As Darnell disappeared through the gate, the lounge remained silent. But in that quiet, each person took something away: shame, remorse, or newfound respect. Ethan exhaled, realizing true authority doesn't reside in managerial titles but in dignity. Outside, the plane lifted off, runway lights glinting as if emphasizing one message: true power doesn't boast. It quietly resides in humility, and that lesson would linger far longer than the event itself.